Well, I think what's really exciting for me is the fact that we are living in a transformational time. So, what I mean by that is a transformational time is one in which things change rapidly, and ideas that may have been hovering at the fringe move to the center unusually fast. So, what this means is that the actions that individuals take have unusual power in a transformational time.
It looks like an awful lot of what we've taken for granted about moving into the future can't continue. The economy isn't going to go back to the old middle class way of life. We've got the question of peak oil and the question of whether we'll ever again have cheap energy. And of course, climate change means that there's an awful lot that needs to change and that will be changing in people's lives in coming years. So our question for that issue is, what is the new normal?
This is Peak Moment. We are living at a peak of human innovation, information, wealth, and health. But we're also at a peak of population and consumption, with rising temperatures and declining resources fueled by cheap oil and gas. Peak Moment Television, bringing you examples of positive responses to energy decline and climate change through local community action.
Hi, welcome to Peak Moment. I'm Janaea Donaldson. I'm in the offices of Yes Magazine in Bainbridge Island in Washington. Yes, powerful ideas, practical actions, and I'm here with Yes's founder and executive editor, Sarah Van Gelder. Thanks for joining me.
Glad to be here.
And Yes's publisher, Fran Korten. Thanks for joining us.
Nice to be here.
Okay, you guys. I think that Yes, I've been reading Yes for, 15 years or so since Yes took over for In Context. And I feel like you're at the forefront of sniffing out what the emergent edges are of a new, a humane, a compassionate culture, some of the taglines that you've used. I mean, it's like, this is where we find the pioneers and the innovators, right? So I'm really wanting to hear what you're tuning into about what's going on in our culture that's exciting, what thrills you. Okay, Sarah, I'll start with you.
Well, the current issue of the magazine is called Ready for Anything, and its theme is a lot like what you do with Peak Moments. It's about the fact that we're in an unsustainable world right now, that things are not going to continue as they have been. So our question is, what does that mean for people in their families, in their communities? What can you do to be prepared? And what can you do if your community is already starting to fall apart in major ways, or your life is already starting to fall apart? What are your options? Where do you go?
Whoa, okay, tell us, that's really important because after this economic collapse, more people, I think, are thinking about exactly those issues. Did you find that in your research?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of people who I think believed that life was going to continue as it was, that the middle class way of life was just, we're going to keep on shopping at Walmarts and we're going to keep on having jobs. And then a lot of people were really caught up short when they suddenly found out that way of life is not so secure. And other people who've been excluded all along but thought maybe they had a crack at the American dream now start realizing, that American dream is not what it was cracked up to be. So they're starting to turn to other ways, for example, starting local community food systems in urban areas, in Detroit, in Cleveland, and Milwaukee.
And what form is that taking in the big cities?
Oh, it's amazing because there's a lot of abandoned land in some of those inner cities. So people are converting some of those into organic gardens. They're taking over land next to schools and getting the kids involved and getting fresh fruits and vegetables to kids. And some of the most amazing work is being done in Milwaukee, where they're not only growing vegetables, they're also doing fish farming on dry land and using the waste products from the fish to fertilize the plants and creating this whole ecological system that's providing really great healthy food to people who had been living in a food desert.
And that way, and they're not even in the money system, right? They're just meeting it fully. They're meeting their needs.
That's right. I mean, there's money changing hands. People are working for them and getting jobs, and they're selling their produce and they're selling their fish. But the main purpose is to make sure that people who haven't had enough to eat or haven't had fresh, because a lot of our cities, the food that's available is from convenience stores. It's full of fat, it's full of sugar. People are really unhealthy if that's what they have to rely on. So people are saying, we need to be getting good food to people where they are right now, and we can raise that ourselves.
It sounds like fabulous material in the issue.
Oh, it's a lot of fun to do this issue.
Really?
Food is just the beginning. We can talk about all sorts of other places where people are.
Let's toss the ball to Fran for a little bit here. Just put her on the spot here.
Great. Well, I think it's no coincidence that we've landed talking about food first, because food appears to be the avenue into thinking about a different economy, a different sense of community that works for people across a bigger spectrum than almost anything else. So you can be a libertarian, you can be a Republican, you can be a Green, you can be a Democrat, and everybody can feel like a farmer's market is a good idea.
Sure.
That CSAs, that urban agriculture, as Sarah was referring to in Milwaukee or Detroit, are healthy, good things because they hook in at so many different dimensions. Some, it's a way to avoid the corporatization and the monoculture and mass production of agribusiness. For others, it's about building community. It's about people coming together. For others, it's about their own body and their own health and their family's health. And for some, it's more fun. As Bill McKibben says, you have 10 times more conversations at a farmer's market than you do at a grocery store.
That is for sure.
So food is an avenue into a much larger conversation and a much bigger vision of what we can become. And of course that bigger vision is partly what your TV work is about, and it's also about what Yes Magazine stands for and brings to the fore every quarter in the magazine and every day online.
So where do we find you online then, while we've said it here?
Sure.
Every day online, what happens?
Every day online at www.yesmagazine.org. We post a story, often that's timely, whether it be about the BP oil spill or about Obama's forthcoming speech on our foreign policy and wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, or about stuff closer to home. We have a blogger online that's become a real favorite, and I think you might enjoy talking with her sometime, named Shannon Hayes, and she calls herself a radical homemaker. And I love this term because homemaker sounds kind of old-fashoned. In the feminist world, you know, we don't talk about homemakers. She's a radical homemaker. So she's rethinking what being a homemaker means. And I think it is that kind of rethinking that a growing number of people are open to. And that's why she's a very popular blog on our site. And the fact that we are now posting stories every day allows us to bring in voices such as Shannon's in a regular way that people can kind of be fed with their ideas. For example, she had one recently about celebrating her daughter's birthday. So how do we celebrate a birthday? Well, a lot of people, it's kind of like, okay, you'll have a party and everybody will bring a present and the grandparents will bring presents, and pretty soon you have this big pile. And the kid is interested in some of them and loves opening it, but then pretty soon you sort of have a pile of garbage that's cluttering your house, and pretty soon it's cluttering the landfill. So she's rethinking that. What is really meaningful to a child? And of course what they really want is attention from their parents and their friends. They want things that don't clutter the landfill, do not cost money. So that's the kind of grist that people are coming to Yes Magazine's website for, and also the magazine, as they rethink their own lives. And partly the advantage of a hard copy magazine is you can send it to your relatives when you're trying to help them understand why, Grandma, we really don't want you to send the kid 4 gifts. So it's a way to help change the culture, spread ideas from people who are doing some rethinking and need some support.
I think that's a real critical thing there, the support, is if you read about somebody else that's built a tiny house, which is what I learned about from your cover, is a little mobile house that look going down the road, or people that are doing the growing fish cultivation in the middle of the city, you start to feel not so lonely. Mm-hmm. Either with your ideas that you haven't even put into shape yet, but to know that you're not the only one that's converting your front yard into a vegetable garden, even though you're the only one in your town. I think this is what YES does encourage.
I think that's absolutely right. I think, most of the corporate-owned media is much more interested in stories of violence, in abuse, and tragedies of various kinds, human tragedies, global tragedies. And those are important stories to be told, but the other side needs to be told too. Not just because it's good news and not just because it makes us feel better, but because it opens up possibilities. Because people don't know those possibilities exist unless they either know somebody who's already doing them or they read about them.
Right,
and
right.
We want to provide those avenues for people because it's our view that people are actually amazingly creative, that they want to live well, they want to live in a better world. And so we don't have to convince them of that. We don't spend a lot of time either online or in the magazine trying to say, you really ought to do something
no,
more.
I get that. Yeah.
So we don't. Instead of doing that, we just want to provide them with the stories and the resources so they can go ahead and do the things that seem right to them.
What you really are highlighting that I see is folks on the grassroots level. You're talking about everyday folks, so that they're approachable here. I mean, you also do address issues. I want to add that there's some really serious thinking in here that says it's not focused on here's what's not working. Your focus is more on here are alternatives to what's not working, but you're not ignoring this. So it's like you're not just fluff, if you will, or not just, it's not a Pollyanna in that way.
That's right, and it's openings in terms of people's own behavior, and it's also openings at the national level. So, for example, as the opportunities for curtailing the use of nuclear weapons have moved over the last 18 months, we have been tracking that and helping our readers both understand what's just happened. For example, if President Obama makes a speech on this, or the head of the United Nations makes a speech on that, but also understanding the context in which that initiative is taking place. And sort of where do we stand on this global nuclear problem, and how does it relate to our relations with Iran or North Korea or Brazil? So we're helping people see both large level, national and international level openings, possibilities, as well as the ones right in their own backyard.
And possibilities, I think, is a really important part of that, because we're always looking for where things can get better and where we have an opportunity to help them get better. Because even those things that are happening nationally and internationally, the American people are really powerful. We have a really powerful voice. We still have a democracy in this country. And what we say to our elected officials matter, and what we think and what we say in our blogs and what we communicate to people in our community and what we put in our local newspapers, those things matter, and they do affect policy. So we can't afford to not be out there looking for those possibilities and looking for where we can have an influence.
It seems to me that what we've seen in the last 10 to 15 years is a real rise of more and more grassroots movements where people are raising their voice, trying to shift the story, the way things are.
Yes, that's right. And I think we particularly like the ones that are about a positive initiative, as we've been talking about, with food, with energy, with housing. Sometimes it's a resistance movement that is also very important, and where people's voice makes a difference. A story we just posted online last week is about the rise of a really horrible practice you may have heard of called hydrofracking. And this is an effort of the gas industry to release natural gas from the ground by breaking the substrata, the rocks under the ground. Now when they do that, it then begins to affect the aquifer, the water under the ground. It affects rivers, it affects reservoirs. And people have just begun to catch on to this. In New York State, they were particularly alarmed because it's been very widespread, and people's tap water out of their faucet, if you put a match to it, it lights on fire because there's all that gas in it. So this has kind of awakened people, and there was a wonderful people power movement, and by golly, the legislature passed at least a temporary moratorium that many people expect will become put into place as permanent. So sometimes something is really needs a people power movement to resist. Sometimes it's positive things that people can do at their community level or their state level or whatever. So both of those are important, and the kind of awareness that people can speak up and people can mount a campaign. And these corporations are very powerful, and of course even more so now with their unlimited ability to put money into political campaigns based on a recent Supreme Court decision. And yet, nevertheless, it is possible to stop some of the bad practices, promote some of the good ones through people power. So one of the themes on our website, we have 5 themes, and one of them is people power, in which we are bringing forth the ways in which people are in fact making a tremendous difference in so many different places.
That's exciting. Give us all 5 themes now that you've tickled us with one.
Okay. One is planet, so all the environmental kinds of things. Peace and social justice. That would range from the foreign policy kinds of things to the criminal justice system or the criminal injustice system. New economy. And I know you've been talking with David Korten and those kind of ideas about how we need to restructure our economy to make it work for the planet, for ordinary people, is a very hot topic that a lot of people are really trying to think through.
Yes.
And in addition to people power, we have happiness.
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 Oh, okay. All right, you two. Talk to us about happiness. I mean, when the serious stuff in the world is going on here and things are, it seems a little fluffy. Although I do recall that the Dalai Lama said something like, if we really did find our happiness, and I think he meant something more deep than we think of with that word. So talk to us about happiness.
Well, I think that the corporate world, the commercial world has been trying to convince us that happiness comes from buying more stuff and going deeply into debt, and that if we don't have this or that material possession, we won't be happy. And of course, when we think about that, we realize that's not really where happiness comes from. Most people on their deathbed don't wish they had one more car or one more gadget. What they think about when they think deeply about happiness are things like their relationships, the people that they love in their lives, their family, and what kinds of things they were able to contribute over the course of their lives. What kind of work did they do? What legacy are they leaving behind? Those are the things that people actually find bring them happiness. And the good news about that is that we can have all sorts of happiness of that sort without destroying the planet, without creating greater inequality of wealth, without making other people in other parts of the world suffer because we have to have their natural resources. All of those things are available to us, the real sources of happiness, without causing that kind of destruction. Whereas if we just keep buying more and more stuff to the extent that we can afford it, if that doesn't destroy our own family, it certainly does destroy the natural resources and the natural sinks, the places for our garbage of the planet.
One of the most popular articles and posters on our website is called 10 Things Science Says Will Make You Happy. And it is a wonderful outline of what actual science. There's a whole science of positive psychology and a lot of findings coming out. So it's a very quick summary. People are buying the poster. It's a nice poster you can put on your fridge and kind of remind yourself, what is it that really brings us happiness? And of course, in those 10 things, there is nothing about stuff. It's all about what Sarah was mentioning. One of them that I am particularly into right now is give it away now.
Oh!
So that whole thing of, clean out your home of the things that you do not need, want, will use, and release that to somebody else to use, unclutter your own life, and make it more joyful. So there's 9 others of this ilk that are a wonderful reminder.
Where to get that on the website? Is that on the website?
It sure is. So you go to www.yesmagazine.org and you click on store, and then you get this array of things, and one of them is posters. And we have wonderful posters that are very popular. Another one is 10 ways to change your life, not just your light bulbs. And this is a summary of some of Colin Beavan's wisdom. He's known as No Impact Man, and he has been getting his environmental impact down to 0 living in the heart of Manhattan. So he's a fun, interesting character, and he's blogged about, he lives with his wife and his now 3-year-old child. So this is not, some hermit living in a cave. So that's another poster that's very popular. There's one on food. Everybody eats, and it kind of looks at what a community food system looks like. In our water issue, we have a very nice one on a watershed and kind of the way that our use of water can be transformed so that we have enough for everyone. And of course, that's a threat these days. It is not clear that that's going to be the case, and it is not the case now for a couple billion people.
So are you tackling in that, did you tackle in that issue things like gray water or rainwater catchment or,
Yeah, there's a whole do-it-yourself section to that issue.
Oh.
It's all about things that you can do in your own home or your own community to save water, to reuse water.
What do we got? 10 ways to change your life. Oh yeah, from Colin Beavan. All right, thank you.
Not
It's good
just
to
your
see
light
that.
bulb.
Not just your light bulbs.
And here is Colin, who
Cool guy.
visited our office
Yeah.
just like last week.
That's fun. That's
Yeah.
Well, I see that you're weaving together, people that are making a difference, like Colin, but I really like your emphasis on what you yourself can do. Your posters. You had one on do it yourself, liberate yourself. I enjoyed that. Some of those ways that you could sort of withdraw from the system, in nice ways. What's coming up? We've only got maybe 10 minutes, 8 minutes. What kind of things are cooking in the cauldron that haven't emerged yet?
Our next issue is going to be on family, and we're doing that for several reasons. One is that with the economy the way it is, a lot of people are, generations are moving back in together, and people are finding, maybe they can't afford that great big mansion in the suburbs, so they're having to rethink that. And the truth is that the little nuclear family is a pretty recent idea. And there's a lot of people, this is previous to the Depression, for example, people lived in multi-generational families. You tended to have grandma, grandpa, or aunts and uncles. People tended to have those kinds of extended family relationships. And then we had this myth that we'd actually be happier if every time there was a new job opening across the country, we would just pick up and leave our family behind and move with our nuclear family and try to make it on our own. Well, for a lot of people that didn't really work out that well, and so people are trying to figure out what does work. How do you get the kind of support you need to raise a family, and what does it mean in a very practical way when you say it takes a village to raise a child, because that is really the truth. It really does take more than a mom and pop.
Sure.
And of course, in many cases, there's only a single parent. So it really does take a community to raise a child. What does that mean in practice? And then, of course, the other thing is that there's a lot of people who are now looking at same-sex marriage. So our understanding of what it means to be a family is starting to open up, and that's creating a lot of discomfort, and people aren't so sure about this and that. And so we wanted to explore that. We wanted to hear from people. How are they finding a good way to live together as a family? How are they finding ways of getting the kind of support, financial support, emotional support? How are they finding good ways to support people who can't necessarily support themselves, elders or young children?
Sure.
So that's the issue that's coming up.
Oh, that'll be juicy, I expect, because that really comes to the heart of so much for people.
That's right.
After all of us living on a little separate suburban or apartment kind of lives, that helps the corporate bottom line, but not our connections.
Right, and one of the things I'm really excited about that is the notion of what does it mean to be an abundant family or an abundant community? Because one of the things that isolation does is it makes us feel poor. It makes us feel like everything we need, we have to go out and spend cash to get it. But when you have the connections of an extended family or a community, you just naturally exchange those things. So the elder down the street who knows how to do some metal work in the shop is teaching the young teenager who really needs a role model, maybe is better off not running with just his friends, but maybe needs an elder in his life, you know. And the elder is finding, oh, there's somebody who wants to learn what I have to teach. So instead of having two people who are both potentially isolated and struggling, you have abundance. And it doesn't take cash changing hands. You have wealth that grows out of relationships.
Real wealth.
That's right.
Real wealth.
That's right.
Yeah. You know, any other little gems that are sparking, or what you've loved about doing this work?
Well, I want to make sure people know about our weekly e-newsletter.
Oh, good.
Because it is such an exciting new thing that we're doing now. You know, we do, yes, quarterly, so we have a chance to really think deeply about a topic and really reframe what are the possibilities for that particular topic. But we're also now, as Fran mentioned, we're able to post every day and to post new, fresh things online that are relevant to the things that are in the headlines that day. And if people want to be able to keep track of that and be able to hear about them, we have a weekly newsletter. Every week we pick out the top 5 or 6 items that are online and send it to people free of charge. So it's a great way to stay connected to Yes Magazine.
And I assume that you can go to the website and sign up
Sign up for Yes This Week.
Thank you for joining us, and keep up the good work for another few decades and on.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yes, indeed.
You're watching Peak Moment, Locally Reliant, Living for Challenging Times. I am with the editor and publisher of Yes Magazine, and you need to say yes to yes. Join us next time.